In the summer of 2022, Britain recorded 40 degrees Celsius for the first time in recorded history. Trains were cancelled because the tracks buckled, roads melted, hospitals reported heat-related admissions not seen since records began. And across the country, in offices, schools, care homes, and terraced houses built for a different climate entirely, people sat in front of electric fans and waited for it to end, 40 degrees, in Britain. And the solution that most of the developed world installed decades ago, the one that Japan, the United States, Southern Europe, and Australia treat as basic infrastructure, was present in fewer than 5% of British homes. Not because Britain cannot afford it, not because the technology does not work here, but because of a set of assumptions, planning rules, and cultural habits that were formed in a climate that no longer exists. This is not a story about heat. It is a story about a country that built itself for a past it no longer lives in. More than 40% of Britain's housing stock was built before 1960, a legacy of post-war and Victorian construction designed entirely around the single goal of keeping winter cold out. The classic Victorian terrace embodies this design logic. Built with solid brick walls up to 300 millimeters thick, low window-to-wall ratios, and north-facing rear extensions, these structures rely on high thermal mass. Historically, this mass created a deliberate thermal lag that kept homes warm, drawing air up through active chimney stacks. But in a warming climate, that same physical DNA acts as a severe heat trap. The thick masonry absorbs solar radiation during the day and slowly releases it inward at night, pushing indoor temperatures well above the outdoor air. This structural vulnerability was locked in during the energy crises of the 1970s and the 1980s. National retrofit campaigns like the 1978 Homes Insulation Scheme added blanket loft insulation to millions of properties. While these measures successfully cut winter heating bills, they also sealed the roof voids that once allowed rising warm air to escape. Without cross-ventilation, these insulated envelopes became highly efficient ovens, raising summer indoor temperatures by up to 2 degrees Celsius. The building itself is the first reason Britain cools badly. While Britain's houses were being sealed against the cold, other industrial nations began designing their indoor environments for the heat. The United States started mass domestic air conditioning adoption in the 1950s, followed by Japan in the 1960s. By the 1980s, Southern Europe embraced the technology as heat became harder to ignore. By 1995, over 60% of Spanish households had installed air conditioning. In the United Kingdom, that figure remained below 1%. This national divergence was a rational economic calculation. During the 1970s, average July temperatures in southern Britain hovered between 22 and 24 degrees Celsius. Spending significant capital on heavy machinery and additional electricity to combat a handful of warm days made little financial sense. The assumption that summer was a brief, manageable event hardened into culture. Without a climate forcing its adoption, Britain never built the infrastructure or the habit of residential cooling. By the time record temperatures arrived in 2022, fewer than 5% of British homes had any air conditioning installed. In England, the decision to install air conditioning is rarely a simple consumer choice. Permitted development rights, which usually allow minor home improvements without formal applications, do not automatically cover external cooling units on listed buildings or within conservation areas. With over 400,000 listed buildings in England alone, this restriction impacts a vast portion of the historic housing stock. Across millions of additional properties, local councils apply Article 4 directions, stripping away these default rights entirely. Homeowners in the historic stone terraces of Bath, Bristol, and Edinburgh who want to mount an external condenser unit on a street-facing wall must navigate a full planning application. For residents of purpose-built flats, the hurdles are even higher. Leasehold laws require formal consent from the freeholder, and in some buildings, every leaseholder must agree. A single objection from a neighbour can permanently halt an installation. The planning system was built for a fixed climate. What fits the rules and what fits the weather are no longer the same thing. Britain's electricity grid was designed around winter heating demands, leaving the network unprepared for summer cooling peaks. National grid modelling shows that if 20% of British homes install and run air conditioning simultaneously during an extreme heat event, local distribution networks will require billions of pounds in substation reinforcements to prevent voltage drops and localised overloads. This demand arrives in the wrong season, hitting the grid during hot summer afternoons instead of cold winter evenings. Because cooling a poorly insulated, drafty home is highly energy intensive, the country's historic building envelope directly compounds this network strain. France responded to its 15,000 heat-related deaths in 2003 by investing in grid resilience and mandating cooling systems in care homes and hospitals. Britain, by contrast, has relied on guidance-based public health plans rather than physical infrastructure upgrades. This structural mismatch means the housing stock problem and the air conditioning problem are the same issue, viewed from two different sides. Climate adaptation is now a systems question, rather than a matter of individual consumer choice. For decades, British summers were treated as brief national celebrations. Extreme temperatures were treated as novelty events. This seasonal perspective created a shared expectation of endurance, where heat was something to tolerate with an open window. Tabloids cemented this attitude, greeting every heat spike with festive "Phew, what a scorcher" headlines. Within this framework, air conditioning was easily dismissed as an American excess, an environmental waste, or a sign of softness. For most Britons, direct contact with cooling remained confined to the workplace, reduced to localized office temperature arguments. But as summers began breaching historic thresholds, these deeply ingrained cultural habits left the population unprepared for a climate that was shifting faster than their expectations. The UK Health Security Agency estimated that the 2022 heatwave caused 2,809 excess deaths among people aged 65 and over in England. This toll was concentrated in the very institutions built to protect them. The majority of England's 15,000 registered care homes have no mechanical cooling, relying on open windows and fans that fail during prolonged heat waves. During that July spike, nursing home deaths rose by more than 34%. The exposure extended to the youngest. Over 80% of English school buildings lack air conditioning. In July 2022, classroom temperatures breached 38 degrees Celsius, turning learning environments into heat traps where children struggled to concentrate. For the most vulnerable, the absence of active cooling became a direct threat to survival. While luxury developments and corporate offices increasingly include central cooling, the most exposed have the fewest choices. Renters, care home residents, and those in historic housing cannot easily install external equipment. Their vulnerability is dictated by tenure and architecture, transforming temperature control into a modern class divide. Climate adaptation in Britain has a social geography where survival depends on wealth. If this story interested you, there is a video right here about why British homes are still the smallest and coldest in Europe. Subscribe for more deep dive investigations into how our environment is changing. With summers permanently altered, Britain's reluctance to adapt has evolved from a cultural quirk into a structural risk. If this story interested you, there is a video right here about why British homes are still the smallest and coldest in Europe. Subscribe for more.